Hello everyone, and welcome to this video on the history of food guides. Now, over the last 125 years, the USDA and the federal government have put out guidelines essentially telling people what they should eat, how they should eat, and why they should eat it. Now, the reasons for this, a lot of it can say that the government wants us to be healthy, but, not to speculate, but there could be other reasons, such as trying to diversify people's funds and how they appropriate their money towards food, to make sure all sectors of agriculture and business get a play in the economy. But interesting to note, all these guides started first right around the time of the Industrial Revolution, when families started getting busy and started getting back to work. And it's because of that, guides showing families what to eat and how to eat would be simplified so that they could grow up and be healthy Americans and be successful as well as productive for the United States economy. So I hope you enjoy this quick history. Now let's talk about the first food guide. Dr. Wilbur Olin Atwater published the USDA's first nutrition guidelines back in 1894, just after and right in the middle of the American Industrial Revolution. It was originally published as what's called a farmer's bulletin, or what farmers and people should be eating given the current state of agriculture in the country. Followed by that, in 1904, the same Dr. Atwater published Principles of Nutrition and Nutritive Value of Food. Now, this gives the first idea of what to eat and why to eat these particular foods. Now, what's interesting to note is the key principles were variety, proportionality and moderation, measuring calories, and an efficient, affordable diet that focused on nutrient-rich foods, less fat, less sugar, and less starch. Ironically, that is very similar to what is given today. And the best part about this is both these guidelines were published before the idea of vitamins, all right, and finding out what was inside of each food. Now, moving forward, as we get into 1910s, 1930s, right around the time of the World War I and into the Great Depression, more farmers' bulletins and then how to select foods came out. And in 1916, For Young Children came out. So originally it was just a guide that most adults would use. Now they specialized it towards what young children should have. And the categories included milk and meat, cereals, vegetables and fruits, and then fats and fatty foods, and sugars and sugary foods. So it broke down the types of foods that were available, but it didn't really break down why a person should eat it. And then a year later, how to select foods, it began to promote the food groups, or these particular food groups, to adults and why you should eat it. Continuing forward to the 1940s, from about 1930 to 1940, you had the food wheel, and it was a guide to good eating, the basic 7. So the 5 categories that were created now became 7, and you can see them here in the very old government chart here. Green and yellow vegetables, oranges, tomatoes, grapefruit, group 2. Group 3 was potatoes and other vegetables and fruits, so anything that wasn't in the first 2. Milk and milk products, meat, poultry, fish and eggs, bread, flour, and cereals, and then butter and fortified margarine. Interesting to note that a lot of these could be grouped together today, but they separated it out. So by basic 7, it was a foundation for diet for like nutrient adequacy, which means what you should take in over a given period of time. It included daily number of servings needed from each of the 7 food groups. However, it did lack specific serving sizes, so people would tend to overeat maybe the butter or the milk or the protein section and undereat other areas. it was at the time considered complex, and you can see it, there's 7 groups. So to know all 7 and to make sure you get all 7, it doesn't simplify it for the average person. And it was very difficult to follow during economically tough times in the challenge between the time of World War I and the Great Depression, and ultimately World War II. Very financially strapped times to get all of these foods, so it needed to be simpler. Now, after World War II, we get into the good times in America, the 1950s and 60s. They went backwards and decided to do the basic 4. They wanted to simplify this to be simpler and easier to follow. Now, it was still the same foundation diet approach, goals for nutrient adequacy, making sure you get exactly what you need or what should be okay. Economic times were a lot better during this stretch in the United States, so getting food was a lot simpler. Now, it did specify the amounts of the 4 food groups, right? But it did not include guidance on appropriate fats, sugars, and or calorie intake, which allowed people to didn't know where to put that. Not a bad thing, because you would omit a lot of those, but for those that, if it wasn't included, they would still eat it and not necessarily get what was in the basic 4. 1979, the Prudent Diet. This started getting some traction because people started to realize that regardless of what guidelines they were going to give out, that they were going to follow hedonic pleasures or instant gratification. They were going to have sugary foods. They were going to have high-fat foods. They were going to eat fast food at McDonald's or other chains that were starting to pop up. And they were going to drink alcohol and have sodas. So this took into account those extras that people had, all right, and to not derail their diet, that you could have these, but not kill your dietary habits. This was a huge step in helping understand the complexity of how people operate. These were a result of the 1977 dietary goals for the United States being released. They felt like we were moving in an unhealthy direction, so they came up with goals on how to make sure people were healthy. It was based on the basic 4, so nothing had changed since the 1950s, but it included the 5th group to highlight the need to moderate intake, fat, sweets, and alcohol, something that the previous model did not, but the one before that did. And this was finally the understanding that people will still eat non-healthy food and how to approach that and balance it. 1984, the year before I was born, the food wheel. Lots of vibrant colors back then, as you can see here. Again, it follows the total diet approach, and when we say that, it means it wants to incorporate a lot of variety. So variety has been the big key to this since 1896, and it still is the key today. Nothing has changed much. So it included goals for both nutrient adequacy, making sure everyone in the population got enough of what they needed, but moderation at the time, not eating to excess. Now, that was a huge step for all nutrient food groups, and not just the alcohol, sweets, and fats that the Prudent Diet had said. Now, the 5 food groups and the amounts formed the basis for what would become the food guide pyramid, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, daily amounts of food provided at 3 different calorie levels. So you started breaking it down at what people needed. They started realizing that different people had different body sizes and needed different amounts of calories. Now, this would help you based upon your size and how much you needed to take in a given day. Downside is the food wheel still did not provide a visual understanding of serving size. So it would say you need 6 to 11 servings of breads and cereals, but then people had an opportunity or proclivity to overeat a serving, so they were getting more than what they needed. And that seems to be a huge problem, is portion size and control. Now, a lot of people still think this exists, and it's crazy to me as they talk about, the food pyramid, the food pyramid. The food pyramid hasn't been around for almost 10 years, but people still bring it on. It is the pinnacle, is what most people think of. And it's crazy that people don't know it doesn't exist, which means the lack of nutrition education that is there. But the 1992 food pyramid, okay, really broke things down and organized it so people could read it. So this is a lot simpler version of the food wheel, and it showed a tiered approach to food, which means what your base should be, then what you should fill it out, and then what you should minimize as you go up, all based on servings. Now, again, this is built on the total diet approach to the food wheel. Everything has always been total diet. Now, this one different because it used consumer research to make these decisions. The first guide in history to use what people buy and what and how they feel in a survey. So this was huge. They used public data for the first time ever. Now, the illustration focused on the concepts of variety, that you can still get a lot in a small amount. Moderation, that you should have a little bit of each. All right, and proportion, that you should watch how many servings you should have. Now, the visualization was to help people understand each food group and how important they were. And it also included a range of daily amounts across the 3 food levels, that every person is different. Now, it's, again, downsides to this is, although it does say that it helps out with servings, the idea of how much the serving size is still is a huge issue, and that has always been an issue across all food guides. 2005, MyPyramid came out. All right, it got away from the simplistic approach of the food pyramid, but it liked the concept that it tiered up. Now, they changed this pyramid and showed it more proportionality. There's kind of a mixture between the food pyramid and the food wheel. It was introduced along with the 2005 dietary guidelines for Americans, which has since changed. And the pyramid concept continued, and it was based on consumer research. Once again, public data became the most important. What were people eating and why? Now, this one added a ban for oils, moving towards healthy oils to get away from saturated fats, because the incidence of cardiac diseases and saturated fat and high cholesterol and high blood pressure were increasing in this country, which has since increased even more since the inclusion of this. Oils are not bad. It just depends on how much you have. And if you still have too much of a vegetable oil or seed oil, it can still cause more problems later. So that's the one downfall to the MyPyramid concept. But what was great that they added was the concept of physical activity. That everybody has exercise, and that should play a role in your diet, which it does, and how much you take in. And then this was the first one that said all bodies, regardless of your male, female, different age, different structure, different body type, you all have different nutrient needs. Now, flash forward to now, we're in MyPlate mode. So what's the difference between MyPlate and the food pyramid? Well, a change occurred in 2011 to create a simpler and more visual message for consumers to create a healthy plate at mealtime. So why the change? Well, the pyramid was not direct in serving sizes or meal prep suggestions. All right, neither is any food guide. So MyPlate became the first one that actually gave a person a visual of how much they should have on their plate. So it was established in 2011, and the plate divides a typical meal into 5 categories. Right? Fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. It is understood that each of these food groups contain all of the nutrients on some level, whether it's protein, carbohydrates, fat, vitamins, or minerals. So you can get all your nutrition from each of the foods that are provided. Okay. Now, editorial, personal opinion, the 5 groups are added, again, as not to alienate one economic sector over the other. Now, there are some diets that, are strictly vegetarian and focus more on the fruits and vegetables and grains and alienate proteins, including dairy. Some people can live without dairy. Some people can live without grains. Some people can eat more protein type foods and be okay. So this is just to help you get a balanced diet and eat across the spectrum. Again, not alienating one economic sector over another. But let's look at some key concepts before we finish up. Number 1, enjoy your food, but eat less. Moderation. Avoid oversized portions by using the plate. 1/4 of your plate should come from each of your sections. Okay, half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. It can be double vegetable at lunch and dinner time and double fruit for breakfast if you wish. Half of greens should be whole grains. Proteins can be from both animal and plant sources, legumes, beans, lentils. And the icon that serves as a reminder for healthy eating, not intended to provide specific messages. Okay, and it continues the my concept for personalization. Okay, again, downsize. What is the definition of a plate? What plate are they using? Are they using 6-inch plates, 8-inch plates, 12-inch plates? I'm going to tell you it's 8-inch plates. So a lot to think about when it comes to these particular images, that you still need to understand nutrition in order to make full choices, although the MyPlate does provide a much better visual and helps a lot of people keep it simple and not to be overwhelmed by their food choices. Now for some closing thoughts on the food guide history. There have been numerous food guides published over the last 125 years, and there will be more guides in the future. Now the guides change with evolving technology and discoveries. However, a lot of them still have very similar notions on moderation and serving size and variety. Now, food guides attempt not to alienate one food group over the other or businesses that sell within each food group. And remember, guidelines are a guide. They're not hard and fast rules. Every person has nutrient needs, right, that guidelines can help you fulfill. And more importantly, every person must be a lifelong learner with their nutrition education in order to develop the best plan for themselves throughout their lifetime. That being said, nutritional needs change over a lifetime, right? And what you need as a child to what you need as a teenager to an adult, as you age into your golden years, what you need to take in as far as nutrients will change. Now, I hope you learned a little bit about the history of food guides. Please know that they've been around for 125 years. They've changed up and down based upon consumer and scientific information, and a lot of the same facets still apply from 125 years ago till now. There will be future guides, and they will continue to change over time. So be on the lookout. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video presentation. Please watch others on our channel. Have a great day.